I need to ask you a very important question. And I am so nervous. Before you continue, pause for just a moment. Do not rush past these words. There is something I have been carrying in silence, something I have wanted to say to you for longer than you realize, and now that the moment has finally arrived, I am afraid that once I ask you this question, nothing between us will ever feel exactly the same again. You may wonder why I am nervous. You may wonder what could possibly be so important that even the silence before the question feels heavier than the words themselves. But if you could see what is happening behind this moment, you would understand why I have been waiting. I have watched you walk through days when your heart felt exhausted. I have watched you smile when something inside you was quietly breaking. I have watched you tell yourself that you were fine when, deep down, you were waiting for one sign, one answer, one unmistakable moment that would finally explain why certain things had to happen the way they did. And perhaps that is why this question has become so difficult to ask. Because it is not an ordinary question. It carries everything that was left unsaid. Everything you thought was forgotten, everything you prayed about when nobody else knew you were praying, everything you secretly hoped would happen even after you convinced yourself that hope was dangerous. So before I ask you, I need you to promise yourself one thing. Do not answer too quickly, do not answer from fear, do not answer from the wounds of yesterday. Listen to what your heart says when the noise becomes quiet, because the answer you are looking for may have been waiting inside you much longer than you realize. You have spent so much time asking what is coming next that you may have forgotten to ask what your heart truly wants. You have spent so much time wondering who will stay that you may have forgotten how deeply you deserve to be chosen. You have spent so much time trying to understand someone else's silence that you may not have noticed how loudly your own soul has been speaking, and tonight, or this moment, or whenever these words have found you, something is changing, not because the world suddenly became perfect, not because every problem disappeared, but because you are finally standing at the edge of a truth you were not ready to face before. There was a reason certain doors closed. There was a reason certain people disappeared. There was a reason some conversations ended without the explanation you wanted. There was a reason you felt as though you were being delayed while everyone around you seemed to be moving forward. You thought you were being forgotten. You thought you were being rejected. You thought maybe your story had somehow passed you by. But what if you were not being forgotten? What if you were being prepared? What if the silence that frightened you was actually making room for something you could not yet recognize? You may remember the moment when everything seemed to change. Maybe it was a message that never arrived. Maybe it was a person who suddenly became distant. Maybe it was a goodbye you never expected. Maybe it was a dream you had almost stopped believing in. You carried that moment with you. You replayed it in your mind. You wondered what you could have done differently. You asked yourself whether one more conversation could have changed everything. You wondered whether someone was thinking about you. You wondered whether they missed you. You wondered whether your name ever crossed their mind when the night became quiet. And there is something you need to understand. Not every unanswered question means there is no answer. Sometimes the answer is simply waiting for the right moment. Sometimes the truth has to mature before it can be revealed. Sometimes two people need distance before they can understand what their connection actually meant. And sometimes you have to lose control of the story before you discover that the story was never supposed to be controlled by you in the first place. That is why I am nervous, because the question I need to ask you is connected to all of this. It is connected to the part of you that still believes, the part of you that still feels, the part of you that has tried to become strong but secretly still wants to be held. The part of you that says, "I do not care anymore," while quietly hoping that something will prove you wrong. I know that part of you. I know the nights when you stared at the ceiling and wondered whether things would ever make sense. I know how exhausting it became to keep pretending that uncertainty did not hurt. I know how many times you almost gave up on something you once prayed for, and I know there were moments when you felt embarrassed for still caring. You wondered why your heart could not simply let go. You told yourself that if something was meant for you, it would not be this confusing. But what if confusion was not the final chapter? What if it was only the space between what you thought was happening and what was actually happening? There is a hidden layer to your story, something you could not see while you were standing inside the pain. Something becomes visible only when you step back far enough to see the entire picture, and that hidden layer involves a choice you may soon be asked to make, a choice that could change the direction of your heart. A choice that may require you to stop chasing an answer and finally allow the answer to come toward you. This is why I am nervous. Because I do not know what you will say. I have imagined asking you. I have rehearsed the words. I have thought about the right moment. I have wondered whether you would understand what I really mean, and every time I came close, fear stopped me, not fear of your anger, not fear of rejection, something deeper, fear that once the truth is spoken, there will be no way to return to the comfortable uncertainty we have known. You see, uncertainty can hurt, but it can also protect you. As long as you do not know, you can keep imagining, you can keep hoping. You can keep telling yourself that maybe tomorrow will be different. But truth does something imagination cannot do. Truth demands a response. Truth asks you to decide what you are willing to believe. Truth forces you to look at yourself without the excuses you have been using to survive. And perhaps that is what this moment is really about, not another person. Not another promise, not another sign. You are standing at the beginning of an awakening. You are beginning to realize that your worth was never determined by who stayed. Your future was never determined by who walked away. Your beauty was never diminished by someone else's inability to recognize it. Your destiny was never canceled because one chapter ended differently than you expected. You survived things you once believed would destroy you. You walked through seasons that made you question everything, and somehow, you are still here, still breathing, still hoping, still capable of loving, still capable of dreaming, still capable of beginning again. Do you understand what that means? It means the story is not over. And that is where the mystery deepens, because there is something about the way you have changed that someone else has noticed. Someone has been watching your transformation from a distance. Someone has noticed that you are no longer the same person. You do not react the way you used to. You do not chase the way you used to. You do not beg for explanations. You have become quieter, stronger, more aware. And that change has created a question in someone else's heart. They are wondering whether they still have a place in your life. They are wondering whether you would recognize them if they came back. They are wondering whether the door they once left open has quietly closed. And here is the part you may not expect. They may have assumed that you would always be there. They may have believed that time would keep you emotionally available. They may have thought that no matter how long they waited, you would still be standing in the same place. But you are not standing there anymore. You have moved, not necessarily physically, emotionally, spiritually, internally. You have crossed a distance inside yourself. And sometimes that is the greatest distance too people can ever experience. One person can be standing 10 feet away from you and still be miles from the version of you they once knew, and someone may be discovering that truth right now. They may be realizing that your silence was not weakness, your silence was healing, your distance was not punishment, your distance was protection, your absence was not an attempt to make someone miss you. It was the natural result of you finally choosing yourself. And now comes the question I have been afraid to ask, the question that has been sitting quietly between the lines of everything I have said. The question that could open a door you thought had disappeared forever. But before I ask it, I need you to remember something. Do not answer based on loneliness. Loneliness can make the past look beautiful. Loneliness can make old wounds look like old memories. Loneliness can make you mistake familiarity for destiny. So breathe, slowly, let your heart settle, because this question is not about whether you miss someone. It is not about whether you still think about them. It is not about whether you would answer their message at midnight. It is not even about whether you still love them. The question is deeper than that. If the person you once prayed for came back into your life today, but came back differently, if they returned with honesty, instead of excuses, I